Hey, what's up? This is Advent Calendar here. Everybody loves established brands. It's a big part of the overall fashion space, and plenty of trends and fashion communities are dedicated to them. From the popular right now street fashion labels like Stussy and ALD, to the long-term fashion nerd favourites like Rick and Yoji, to those cult classic brands like Acronym and Undercover. Whatever your level of interest in fashion or whatever aesthetic you end up leaning into, no prizes for guessing where my preferences lie, there are often established or respected brands at the top, which everyone is very well aware of, and they're like the golden standard. Wearing those things is generally seen as enviable, or at least a very solid option. Especially in the social media age, where wearing something very recognizable can be a ticket to those extra few likes and that sweet, sweet dopamine. And these well-known brands are well known for a reason. Often they create great or memorable or interesting clothing. At least that's what I tell myself when I continue running my bank account into the ground for Acronym. However, I think we're approaching the age of the unknown brand, the up-and-coming designer, and I'm talking neither just as an alternative to more established brands, nor as a we're spotting the trends first, so we're getting in there and we're very cool before anyone else. No, I'm talking unknown brands having a specific value which more mainstream or more established brands cannot compete with. We'll talk about why I think that is, and in my opinion, why that unique value is becoming more important over time, to answer one critical question. Why should you consider independent brands right now if you're into fashion? I'll show some specific examples of cool brands that I've picked up recently to help illustrate what I'm talking about. With that in mind, let's get going. First off, why the interest in small brands? Well, earlier this year we talked about the idea of authenticity in fashion. When cheap or disposable products are so readily available, and when even luxury products can be very easily bought off the shelf, increasingly people are looking for something that presents a counterpoint to that does something different. Just looking good for an Instagram picture isn't enough, and increasingly people are looking at things which have a value that goes beyond skin deep into something that they perceive to be more real or more authentic. At the very least, a physical or tangible reason to purchase one thing over another. For example, the whole outdoor fashion Gorpcore movement, at least part of that is built around this idea of getting clothing which has this level of performance that does something better than an ordinary piece of clothing would do. My favorite feature, of course, snack carrying ability. The demand for the authentic, the real, the products which reflect the values or the culture of the owner is not just a fashion movement. You've probably seen that swell of content around like vintage Porsches and mid-century modern furniture and vinyl players. After all, that tangible physical experience with putting a vinyl on shows more dedication and more investment than pressing shuffle on Spotify. All that stuff is partly nostalgia and desire for the retro. Of course, yes, this is always going to be popular to some extent, but I think a lot of this trends towards products which have stories attached to them, whether that be a particular history, a particular cultural impact or relevance, or even some kind of fan-only ordering experience which a normal person wouldn't be able to purchase. Vinyl is a great example of that. There's loads of limited edition stuff out there. All of that stuff is in conscious contrast to the easy-to-consume mass-market stuff designed kind of for everyone that's algorithmically served to you and a billion other people. People really value that idea of being very into a subculture and really having something to say and showing their level of investment and involvement in a community. Even if for some consuming those sorts of products is just a badge of honor to show how subversive or culturally relevant they are. Did you know Tame Impala is just one guy? I think the rise of independent or unknown or up-and-coming designers is really an extension of this idea, and my first example is going to help illustrate that, which is Honey Supplies. Brand owner Mona Thomas has been creating fun, playful, Y2K-inspired clothing and accessories for 4 or 5 years now, and built up a little ecosystem of stuff with a clear and cohesive visual style. More recently, she turned her attention to hoodies, which were pretty much an immediate hit. I remember coming across pictures of them on Twitter before they first launched, and since then I've seen them all over the place on social media, and not from paid ads or sponsored content either, but people talking about them and wearing them of their own accord. Some pretty well-known people have got their hands on earlier releases, from Wisdom to Frugal Aesthetic to all kinds of music artists, and they always get asked, where is that hoodie from? And now to that esteemed list, we can add YouTube Z-lister. This is Antwon. So I've got the green one here from, I think this was the 3rd release, and we can find out why people are so keen to know where this hoodie is from all the time. First of all, I think it definitely fits into current fashion trends. The whole Y2K thing is still pretty popular, and the overall cut fit of this has some kind of relationship with the Yeezy, Gap, Balenciaga type stuff, especially with this double layered hood here. The color choices are really great though. All 4 of them could be straight from Jet Set Radio or a Slush Puppy commercial. It's a blending of the retro nostalgia and the new on-trend stuff in a way that other brands are not really doing. You know, this isn't just an alternative to Yeezy, Gap, Balenciaga, because it is presenting something unique, and it's doing that at around 130 euros, which I think, based on the construction of these, using the multi-tones, this really cool embossed front, the elbow pads as well, the unique fit of this, I don't think is an unreasonable ask. Based on how quickly these have sold out on the 2 or 3 drops that have released so far, I also imagine relatively small production runs. Overall, it's a decently made product, but you're clearly in it for the looks rather than the construction. All that helps explain the popularity of these hoodies. You know, they're trendy looking, they're worn by cultural tastemakers, much as that makes me roll my eyes. Limited releases that only fans and followers of the brand are going to be able to keep up with. But that's not the whole story, because pretty much any brand can do those things. What is it that gives this truly unique appeal? Well, the Honey Supply's website paints a real 2000s era rave culture world that's a bit too bold for an enormous e-commerce site to replicate, for one. I think this is a nice little ecosystem here, although you could argue it's a little bit Y2K cosplay. If you're being really cynical, you could say that makes it a bit inauthentic. So maybe we're 50-50 on that. However, I believe it's Mona herself who is key to this brand. She is extremely linked with the identity of Honey Supplies, to the point that when you buy one of these, you really feel like you're not just buying from faceless corporation Honey Supplies, you are buying from Mona and her team. And that's really because her personal Instagram account is pretty much a 50-50 mix of product development, stuff to do with the brand, drops, and just what she's up to day to day, sharing her personal life, stuff like that. I think increasingly people feel good about being able to say that what they're wearing or what they own is from a particular person that they can really identify with. And where you can see that human element and not just layer upon layer of very curated brand identity and photo shoots. So when somebody inevitably asks, hey, where's that hoodie from? You don't have to bow your head in shame and say, some mega corporation after I was advertised it 1,000 times. But instead, look, I got it from this person. Isn't she cool? That in itself contributes to a story that big brands literally cannot replicate. Much as they would like to, that's partly what all of those celebrity endorsements and collaborations are all about, but it's just not quite the same. But people take pleasure spending money in this way. They feel a sense of authenticity buying from a person, sending their money to someone where it looks like there is some tangible impact and not just sending it to some building. Now, I have to admit, these Honey Supply hoodies are one of those things that kind of blew up on social media and went from nothing to being everywhere fairly quickly. Maybe you've even come across these independent of this video. And on the one hand, it is good to be cautious of this kind of viral stuff popping up from nowhere and not succumbing to FOMO and feeling like, oh, I simply must own one of these Honey Supply hoodies because everyone else is buying them. But I do think that it's great that independent designers have this opportunity where if they have a good idea, it's executed with creativity, they have that chance to just be kind of captured with that viral popularity and really blow up out of nowhere. Fashion feels very democratized right now, and I think that process can happen to a relative industry outsider where a great idea or an interesting idea can be catapulted to a huge audience through community support and viral appeal. So next I want to look at something that feels quite different to that in a few ways, which is amulet wear. I came across them purely by personal recommendation rather than any viral content, which instantly gave me a good feeling. I think everyone at some point has ended up buying something because someone they trusted has recommended it, and I think that really plays into that whole authenticity idea. They have a curated selection of products which really draws from the physical value of clothing, how they feel, as well as the visual hallmarks of workwear products. Just take a look at these awesome pre-faded hoodies, for example, which really nail that authentically worn-in look, creating a garment that looks like it could last forever. And inadvertently, you've been looking at one of their hoodies the entire time because I'm wearing it right here that they were kind enough to send over, so thanks very much to them for that. Taking a look in a bit closer detail, you can see the pocket array on the front here is directly representative of a carpenter's overalls that I think is a great visual detail and links these to that heavy-duty workwear aesthetic and combines this with a cropped, boxy fit, which kind of brings this more up-to-date, more on-trend. Not to mention the structured, heavy weight of the fabric here is beyond something that you'd find at a regular retailer, really making it feel like you're getting a lot for your money. You're getting something that has this kind of tangible, durable quality to it. And in contrast to the last hoodie we looked at, that physicality of this garment comes far before the branding. You can see a very small tonal amulet stitched logo above the pocket here, and that is literally it for external branding. It's purely the design and the material construction of the garment that's doing the talking. Plays exactly into that demand people have for something that feels real and authentic. And of course it's right on brand with that carpenter theme. They even made an engraved hammer multi-tool as a fun accessory. Being a very small brand, they release 1 or 2 products at a time, so it's definitely one you have to keep an eye on their Instagram to see any upcoming products or restocks, things like that. But it's definitely one I'd recommend if you're into that idea of low-key but high-quality garments. Which, thanks to little details like the sun fading on some items, the pocket array, that cropped fit, still have that bit of personality to them. There's a great sense of development and improvement too. You can see each new product being an iteration or a variation on something that came before it. So you really get a sense that you're contributing to this development and improvement on the brand, which is quite cool to me. And to return to that personal idea, I was recently shown a video on Keezy TV, actually including the brand owner, and he came across as a super nice, chill guy, which has definitely been my experience speaking with him. Again, it's a level of human connection that established brands love to replicate, but it's just not the same. In the case of independent brands, there is that personal relationship to what you're buying in what is otherwise a very impersonal world. And in my opinion, in fashion, that is increasingly being seen as important. I do get that some startup brands are not always super original, or they're more about marketing than they are about creating products, but that's all the more reason to celebrate the people who are taking a very creative approach or really doing things from the ground up and trying to reinvent stuff. Luca Hamers is certainly one with some ambition here. He's been working on his eponymous brand for the past year or so, and only now is starting to release product to the public. There's a capsule collection slated to launch early next year. I got the chance to go to his studio to have a look at some of this stuff. Unfortunately, I can't show any of it right now, but I'm definitely looking forward to it being released. There's some cool ideas there, fusing technical fabrics and hardware with organic shapes and concealed functionality. You could definitely tell the inspiration from science fiction and anime. Very recently though, he worked on a collaboration with artist Johnny Terras to come up with a couple of different t-shirts with these back printed graphics, printed on this really high quality cut and sew tee that was made in London. He was kind enough to give me one of these, so massive thanks to him. I'll definitely be rocking this and scaring the general public. Right now, of course, this is a super underground brand. Your average fashion fan is not gonna know who Luca Hamers is, but once this stuff drops, of course, opting for this over an established fashion brand is going to give you the materials and the hardware that you might recognize from established or luxury technical fashion brands, but with an overall different finish, with different references, and it's going to be an overall unique garment. I also really see value in following a designer like Luca's journey and being part of their community and seeing how that brand grows and develops over time. I think Garuda also falls into this category. If you're an Antwon video enthusiast, that's a name you're going to recognize, but this is almost a reintroduction because for his last collection, brand owner Suhail totally changed what he was doing. Rather than technical clothing using well-known materials like dry skin, instead he's taking inspiration from traditional Indian garments and reinventing them. Think very flowing, lightweight garments like the salwar pants here that he very kindly sent over, which definitely are a great example of that, as well as the jacket. In my eyes, it's not only cool that he's evolving and changing the brand with the agility that only a very small brand could do, but actually personally documenting what that process kind of looks and feels like in a way that no established brand would ever attempt. You can read why he opted to make that change and some of the challenges and some of the mistakes along the way. That gives you a great authentic perspective into that process and gives you that more personal connection to the things that you might be interested in buying. And yes, of course, big established brands are very capable of putting out press releases or news which goes into detail about inspirations behind products and how they were created and things like that. But there's a big difference between something created by a PR and a marketing team in order to uplift and sell a product and the excerpts from a personal journal of a singular designer. The fundamental idea here is definitely one that I would like to see refined and progressed. These Salwar pants here are super comfy. I love that tie-up waist. It's very different to anything that I own, and the overall construction of the pant makes for a very loose, flowy, comfortable design that's mega easy to move around in. And all of this using a single piece of fabric as well, which is a very interesting technical challenge, which in some ways is related to the challenges of creating technical clothing, but also the polar opposite. Previously, you're looking at highly articulated garments, very complicated patterning using lots of pieces of material. Here, it's how do you turn a single piece into something that actually resembles a wearable pair of pants. If you remember the brand's previous work, would love to hear your thoughts in the comments about this new change in direction. I'd like to return to something I mentioned earlier though, the idea of individuals and communities being able to shape the progress of these independent or unknown brands. One step further though is community support actually helping to create something from nothing. With that in mind, let's look at Jean-Luc Lavelle, who literally started from zero, learning to make clothes himself during COVID lockdown and sharing the results online with his fans. That gained him some traction and support, with his unique take on outdoor clothing and performance gear really capturing the interest of people that saw it. And he was getting frequent comments saying, you know, when are you going to start a brand? Are you going to sell this stuff? Can I buy this? Well, fast forward to now, and he has indeed launched a brand under his own name, JLAL, with his first collection already being available at a few retailers like this thing of ours, and it seems like it's been pretty popular. It's selling pretty effectively. Not only that, but he consulted on an urban-focused line, a sub-brand, if you will, of Goldwyn called Goldwyn Zero, which again looks really cool and definitely has some unique value. I think it's awesome that an industry outsider used that talent and natural aptitude, and I'm sure a lot of hard work, to basically turn nothing into something in a comparatively short space of time. It's a really testament both to his abilities and the good side of social media. Individuals like you and me kind of provided that support and that engagement to allow that to happen. As with the other brands, that story is massively linked to the value of JLAL and of Goldwyn Zero, and I'd be willing to bet that a lot of the early adopters for these brands are people who have been following Jean-Luc from the start, who have really appreciated his designs and hard work and have seen that grow and evolve from nothing. In all of these cases, independent brands have something genuine to offer, both from a physical garment perspective and from a story perspective. A natural question here that arises, of course, how exactly do we find these brands which are underground and unknown by nature? I don't necessarily have an easy answer for that. We've shown a few examples here, but this is really just scratching the surface of what's available. But I would say keep an eye on two things. Firstly, by engaging with this kind of content that you see the creative stuff, you see the process of things being made, you see brands like this. Engaging with that is gonna help your feed tailor itself more towards smaller brands, up-and-coming creatives, new stuff like that. And secondly, keep an eye out for smaller communities which really go deep into particular passions or things that you're really interested in. I've got to shout out Mike Sunday on this one, who does a lot of great creative work and is very interested in fashion and design. These kinds of creative people can often be a gateway into cool fashion stuff. And I think, in fact, I saw the original Honey Supplies tweet because he liked it. Of course, there is a certain irony here in that all of these things that we see from independent brands too are subject to exactly the same social algorithms. It's still social media that serves you up that very authentic content of people lounging around in their Eames chairs deciding which vinyl to put on. Yeah, we want the real and the authentic, but maybe we still want it to be packaged up into a nice digestible 60-second video. So it's not perfect, those things don't always tell the whole story, but it's a start. And if nothing else, it proves at least some level of democratization where David and Goliath can coexist. And hey, I guess I have to thank those same social algorithms for showing you this video. I very much hope that they were on point and you enjoyed it, you found it useful. Please do give it a like if you did, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic, and if you've got any more suggestions for these kinds of underground or independent brands that you think are underrated, that people are sleeping on, that you want to help support, that would be awesome. And if you'd like to see a follow-up to this video where we talk about some more different fashion brands, as I said earlier, I've only scratched the surface here, I'm sure there's more great suggestions from you as well, then let me know, because we can definitely look to making a sequel or a follow-up of some kind, because I'd love to use this platform to give more exposure to some interesting, creative, independent people who I think deserve it. Hope that sounds good to you. If you want to see more fashion content, please do consider subscribing, and until then, I'll see you very soon in the next video.